hard he had to mute his own comms. Railguns. On a species that still argued about whose turn it was to fix the vending machine.
Defenseless!
His officers laughed
They
at
are
him.
defenseless!
Weapons already locked. Victory
Wipe
already
them
assumed.
out.
Nobody on that bridge knew they were about to become the most replayed cautionary tale in galactic military history. One human
You may
ship,
fire
one
when
shot,
ready, Chen.
and a silence afterward that no alien language could heard. The Vok'thari Armada never lost a first encounter. In 300 years of contact with new species, their opening move was always the same: a show of overwhelming force, close enough to be terrifying, far enough to be diplomatic. It worked every time. Species surrendered territory, resources, sometimes entire star systems, just to avoid finding out what came after the warning shot. So when scout reports came back on the little blue planet at the edge of the Kesari expanse, Fleet Commander Draven Ossik barely looked up from his tea. Primitive, the report read, chemical rockets, basic orbital defense, weapons technology roughly equivalent to species we've conquered 100 times over. Recommend standard intimidation protocol. Standard protocol meant 12 warships, full formation, dropping out of subspace directly above Earth's moon close enough that ground-based telescopes would catch every detail, far enough that it read as a message, not an attack. Humanity's response confused them immediately. No panic broadcasts, no surrender messages, no desperate pleas for mercy, the kind Draven had heard in 40 different alien dialects over his career. Instead, Earth's global communications simply went quiet. Military channels closed. Civilian broadcasts kept running like nothing had happened. Sports scores? Weather reports? Some woman on a morning show talking about brunch recipes like there weren't 12 alien warships sitting in the sky. They're not scared, his second-in-command noted, scanning the data. Or they're too stupid to be scared. Same thing in the end, Draven replied, setting down his tea. Send the standard message. Full surrender terms. Give them 6 hours. The message went out in every major human language, translated by systems that had cracked 1,000 tongues before. The reply came back in less than 10 minutes, terse, almost bored. Negative. Please hold position. We're finishing lunch. Draven actually laughed out loud that time, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't managed in years. His bridge crew joined in, some out of amusement, some out of relief that this conquest, like all the others, would be easy. None of them noticed the single, unremarkable-looking human vessel quietly repositioning itself at the edge of their formation. Running system checks nobody on the Vok'thari sensors as a threat. They should have. The ship was called the USS Dakota Ridge Not a warship by any official designation, more of a heavily modified research vessel that had, over the past 18 months, been quietly retrofitted with a weapons system most of Earth's own governments didn't officially acknowledge existed. A railgun. Not the toy version people had seen in old test footage decades earlier. A real one, built by a joint program that pulled the best minds from a dozen countries who'd finally stopped competing long enough to build something together. It fired a projectile at roughly 7% the speed of light, using nothing but raw kinetic force, no explosives, no exotic energy source the Vok'thari sensors were even calibrated to detect. Just pure brutal physics. Captain Elena Reyes had one job that day: sit quietly at the edge of the formation, run diagnostics, and wait for the order that everyone hoped wouldn't come. It came at hour 5 of the 6-hour ultimatum. Earth's governments, in a rare moment of total unity, had made their decision hours earlier, not to fight a war, but to send a message loud enough that there wouldn't need to be one. A single warning shot, calculated with pinpoint precision, aimed not at a populated ship, but at an empty stretch of open space just off the Vok'thari flagship's bow. Close enough to feel, far enough to be, technically, a warning. Target locked, Reyes said quietly, watching the numbers scroll across her screen. Her weapons officer, a 26-year-old former Navy engineer named Marcus Chen, kept his hands steady on the console despite his heart hammering against his ribs. On your call, Captain. Reyes exhaled slowly. 6 hours of alien laughter, 6 hours of insults in a language translated just clearly enough to sting, 6 hours of watching her planet get talked down to by a fleet that had no idea what quiet, patient people were capable of building when they stopped arguing long enough to focus. Fire, she said. The railgun didn't roar. It didn't flash dramatically like the movies. It just fired a single projectile, no bigger than a bowling ball, screaming through space at a speed that made the Vok'thari's finest deflector shields completely, utterly irrelevant. The projectile passed within 200 meters of the Vok'thari flagship's bow a euro, close enough to rattle every system on board, far enough to leave the hull untouched. It didn't stop there. It kept going, tearing straight through an unmanned asteroid monitoring drone the Vok'thari had stationed nearby, then continued on, unbothered, deeper into open space. The drone didn't explode. It didn't crumple. It simply ceased to exist as a coherent object, vaporized so completely that sensor logs initially registered it as a data error. Silence fell across the Vok'thari Bridge a euros, the same silence Draven Ossik had never once heard in 300 years of first contacts. His weapons officer, hand shaking, pulled up the projectile's velocity readout and had to run the calculation 3 times before he trusted the number enough to speak. "Commander, that shot had no propellant signature, no energy discharge, no exotic particles. It was just mass. Pure kinetic mass, moving at nearly light speed." "That's not possible," Draven said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Their tech reports said chemical rockets, basic orbital defense." "Sir," his second-in-command said quietly, staring at her own screen, "I don't think that report was wrong. I think we misunderstood what basic meant to them." A new message came through from Earth. This time not from a diplomat or a government spokesperson, but broadcast openly across every channel the Vok'thari fleet was monitoring a zero, meant to be heard by every crew member, every officer, everyone. That was a warning shot. "We aim to miss. Next one won't." Draven stared at the message for a long moment, then looked out at the quiet, unassuming blue planet below a euros, the one his own reports had called primitive, backward, an easy conquest. He thought about the 12 warships under his command, built for intimidation, for overwhelming shows of force against species too scared to fight back. He thought about the calm, almost bored voice that had told him to hold position, because they were finishing lunch. He thought about the fact that this species had built something capable of erasing his flagship from existence, and their first move had been to deliberately, precisely miss. That wasn't weakness. That was control. "Stand down," Draven said quietly. "All ships, stand down." The formal retreat of the Vok'thari Armada took 11 minutes a euros, the fastest full fleet withdrawal in their recorded military history. No shots were exchanged. No further threats were made. Just 12 warships quietly repositioning, powering down weapons systems, and requesting formal diplomatic contact through proper channels for the first time since arriving. Earth's response, delivered by an actual diplomat this time instead of a bored radio operator, was almost gentle by comparison. "Request acknowledged. Standing by for respectful negotiation." Word of the encounter spread through Vok'thari space within days, then through neighboring systems within weeks, then eventually to nearly every corner of known space that had ever heard of the primitive blue planet at the edge of the Kasari expanse. The story got exaggerated with every retelling a euros. The railgun grew bigger, the shot grew closer, the aliens grew more terrified a euros, but the core of it never changed. A species everyone underestimated had built a weapon nobody saw coming, used it with more restraint and precision than fleets 10 times their size, and made their point without firing a single shot meant to kill. Back on the USS Dakota Ridge, Captain Reyes finally let herself breathe, watching the Vok'thari fleet retreat on her screen. Marcus Chen, still catching his breath at the weapons console, managed a shaky laugh. "We really just did that," he said. "We really just told an entire alien armada to finish their lunch." "Damn right we did," Reyes said, allowing herself a small, tired smile. "Nobody messes with people who build things quietly and use them wisely." Back on Earth, the story broke publicly within hours, and for once, the entire planet agreed on something. Cities that had been glued to their screens in tense silence erupted into celebration. Strangers hugged on street corners. Somewhere in a crowded bar in Chicago, someone raised a glass and shouted the line that would end up printed on t-shirts, murals, and late-night talk show monologues for years to come. "They laughed at our railguns. Guess who's not laughing now?"